Elena Vasquez handed over $99 for a building that had been sitting empty for 15 years. The store looked like it should have cost nothing, maybe less than nothing, considering someone would eventually need to tear it down. But Harrison Webb took those crumpled bills with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, signed the deed without once meeting her eyes, and practically ran from the office before the notary had finished stamping the papers. Elena stood on the cracked sidewalk of Crescent Street, watching Webb's expensive car disappear around the corner far too quickly for a man who had just completed a simple transaction. She felt the first cold thread of doubt wind its way through her chest. Why would anyone sell commercial property in the heart of Millbrook's historic district for less than a month's coffee budget? Even a gutted shell in this neighborhood should have commanded at least $50,000. The storefront's windows were covered with decades of grime, so thick she could barely see through them. Faded gold lettering above the door still read Webb & Associates Fine Furnishings, though half the letters had flaked away, leaving ghostly impressions on the weathered wood. The building tilted slightly to the left, its brick facade stained dark with rain and neglect, mortar crumbling from between the stones. Most people would see a teardown waiting to happen, a liability eating up property taxes. Elena saw salvageable materials, copper piping, vintage light fixtures, original hardwood floors, maybe enough to keep her small restoration business alive through another difficult season. She had $800 left in her business account. The landlord had already called twice about overdue rent on her workshop space. Her truck needed new brakes. Her daughter's college tuition payment was due in 6 weeks. The arithmetic was brutal but simple: $99 invested, maybe $4,000 or $5,000 earned if she worked smart, stripped the building efficiently, and found the right buyers for architectural salvage. But when Elena pushed open the warped front door and stepped inside with Luna, her German shepherd, padding nervously beside her, the simple arithmetic dissolved into something far more complicated. Luna stopped 3 steps past the threshold. The dog's ears flattened against her skull, every muscle in her body drawing tight beneath her dark coat. Luna had been with Elena for 7 years, through job sites with aggressive contractors, through late nights in empty buildings, through every kind of situation a restoration worker encountered. The dog had never acted like this. Not once. The air inside tasted wrong. Not just stale from years of being sealed, but metallic, sharp, like breathing through a mouthful of old pennies that had been buried in damp earth and recently dug up. Elena pulled out her flashlight and swept the beam across the interior. The space was completely, impossibly empty. No shelves. No counters. No trash. No graffiti. No evidence that anyone had been inside this building for over a decade. 15 years of abandonment should have left something behind: squatters' debris, teenagers' beer cans, the detritus of urban decay. Instead, the main floor looked deliberately, methodically erased. The wooden floorboards were bare and scarred, but clean. The walls had been stripped to exposed brick with surgical precision. Even the electrical fixtures had been removed, leaving only holes in the plaster. Something about the emptiness felt intentional, aggressive, as if someone had worked very hard to erase every trace of what this place had once been. Elena's boots echoed as she walked deeper into the space, and the sound was wrong. Each footstep produced a resonance that suggested hollowness beneath the floorboards, spaces that shouldn't exist under a street-level commercial building. She knelt near the center of the room and rapped her knuckles against the wood. The sound came back hollow, deep, like knocking on the lid of a buried box. Luna whined low in her throat and pressed against Elena's leg, trembling. "It's okay, girl," Elena murmured, though she wasn't sure she believed it. She moved toward the back wall, running her hand along the exposed brickwork. The surface felt colder than it should, colder than the autumn air outside warranted. Her fingers found something, a vertical seam, barely visible in the flashlight beam, where newer mortar had been applied over older work. The color was almost identical, but not quite. Someone had tried very hard to hide the seam, but Elena had spent 15 years restoring old buildings. She knew the difference between original work and careful concealment. She pressed her palm flat against the section. It gave slightly, just a fraction of an inch, before meeting resistance. Not a solid wall. A door. Elena returned to her truck and retrieved her toolkit, crowbar, hammer, work gloves, and a better flashlight. Back inside, she wedged the crowbar into the seam and pulled. The hidden door resisted, then swung inward with a pneumatic hiss that suggested sealed spaces and controlled environments. Cool air rushed out, carrying that metallic taste and something else underneath it, old paper, machine oil, and a smell Elena couldn't quite identify but recognized instinctively as wrong. Behind the false wall, a staircase descended into absolute darkness. 20 steps, maybe 25, dropping down to a depth that made no architectural sense. The building's foundation should be at most 8 feet below street level. These stairs went much deeper. Elena tied Luna's leash to a support beam. The dog did not protest. If anything, she looked relieved to be left behind. "Stay," Elena commanded, and Luna sat immediately, ears still flat, eyes fixed on the dark opening. The temperature dropped as Elena descended. By the time her boots hit concrete at the bottom, her breath was fogging in the beam of her flashlight. She stood in a basement that was too large, too finished, too deliberately constructed to be a simple storage space. The walls were poured concrete, not brick. The floor was level and sealed. Overhead, she could see modern HVAC vents in what looked like a dehumidification system, still faintly humming with residual power. Someone had maintained this space. Recently. Against the far wall, dominating the room like a steel monument, stood a vault door. Not a residential safe or even a commercial security box, but a genuine bank-grade vault door from the 1950s or 60s. The circular portal was at least 4 feet in diameter, with a massive wheel lock in the center and multiple bolt mechanisms visible around the perimeter. Installing something like this would have required serious planning, serious money, and serious reasons. Elena approached slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The vault door was clean. No dust, no corrosion, no signs of age. Someone had been maintaining it, oiling the mechanisms, keeping it functional through decades of supposed abandonment. Fresh scratches marked the metal around the combination dial. Recent scratches, made within the last few months, maybe weeks. Someone had tried to open this vault. Someone had failed. She reached out and gripped the wheel lock, pulling with both hands. It didn't budge even a fraction of an inch. Locked tight, combination unknown, designed to resist anything short of industrial cutting equipment. As Elena stepped back, her boot struck something on the floor. She aimed her flashlight down and saw a metal document box, the kind used for fire-safe storage of important papers. It sat against the base of the vault, partially hidden behind a support column, as if someone had placed it there quickly and then forgotten about it or been interrupted before they could return. Elena picked up the box. It wasn't locked. Inside, she found documents. Dozens of them. Property deeds, all for buildings in Millbrook's Crescent Street Historic District. All signed over to either Harrison Webb or his father, Edmund Webb, for prices that made her $99 purchase look reasonable by comparison. She carried the box to a clear section of floor and spread the documents out, organizing them by date. Her hands moved automatically, her restoration training kicking in even as her mind reeled. 37 properties over 40 years. 37 families who had sold prime downtown real estate during the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, when Millbrook was undergoing urban renewal and the historic Crescent Street neighborhood was being systematically dismantled and rebuilt with high-end condos and boutique shops. Some signatures looked steady, confident, the mark of people making willing business decisions. But others shook across the page, trembling, as though the pen had been gripped by frightened or elderly hands forced into signing something they didn't want to sign. And 6 deeds bore dates that Elena recognized, dates that had been seared into Millbrook's collective memory: a warehouse fire that killed 3 people, a construction crane collapse, a carbon monoxide leak in an apartment building, a boating accident, a home invasion, a car crash. She remembered some of these from news archives she'd read while researching the neighborhood's history. Tragedies, the articles had called them. Unfortunate accidents during a period of rapid change and development. Random misfortunes that seemed to cluster around Crescent Street during the exact years when the Webb family was expanding their real estate empire. Lined up on this concrete floor, arranged in chronological order, they looked like something else entirely. They looked like a pattern. Elena's hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone and began photographing each document. She thought of her own family, of her Aunt Rosa who had owned a small bakery on Crescent Street. The bakery that had burned down when Elena was 9 years old. The fire that had killed Aunt Rosa's business partner. The insurance settlement that hadn't covered the property value. The offer that had come 2 weeks later from Edmund Webb, cash for the lot, below market value but enough to relocate somewhere cheaper. Her aunt had taken it, grateful for the lifeline, devastated but believing she had no choice. Elena had visited that lot years later. A luxury condo building stood there now, each unit selling for over $1 million. Her aunt hadn't been saved by Edmund Webb's offer. She'd been removed. Carefully. Legally. Permanently. The implications sat in Elena's chest like stones. 37 families. 40 years. How many lives destroyed? How many dreams crushed? How much wealth transferred from working families to one man's empire, all hidden behind paperwork and tragic coincidences? In the vault. Whatever was inside that sealed vault mattered more than these documents. The deeds were evidence of theft, but they'd been left in an unlocked box, almost carelessly. The real secret, the thing Harrison Webb was truly afraid of, was still locked away behind 4-inch thick steel. Elena's phone buzzed, making her jump. Text from an unknown number, Ms. Vasquez. We need to talk about your purchase. Call me immediately. Harrison Webb. She stared at the message. He'd gotten her number somehow. Probably from the deed paperwork, but the speed suggested he'd been waiting, watching, anticipating this exact situation. Elena gathered the documents, returned them to the metal box, and carried it up the stairs. Luna stood immediately when she emerged, tail wagging with obvious relief. Together they left the building, Elena locking the door behind her with the key that now felt heavy with implications. Across the street, she noticed a dark blue SUV with tinted windows, engine running. It had been empty when she'd arrived 2 hours ago. Now someone sat in the driver's seat, watching. Elena loaded Luna into her truck and drove away, checking her mirrors constantly. The SUV followed at a distance, never close enough to seem obvious, never far enough to lose sight of her. When she pulled into her apartment complex, it continued past, but Elena had already memorized the license plate. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with the documents spread before her, reading until her eyes burned and her daughter Sophia came out in her pajamas asking why Mom wasn't in bed yet. Just work stuff, baby. Go back to sleep. But it wasn't just work. It was 40 years of systematic theft and violence, all documented in careful legal language. The Webbs had built their fortune by destroying families, by turning tragedies into opportunities, by using fear and pressure to force people into signing away their legacies. In the vault. What could be so valuable, so dangerous, that it required a bank-grade vault hidden beneath a supposedly abandoned building? More documents? Cash? Evidence of something even worse? Elena's phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number. She answered. Ms. Vasquez. The voice was smooth, educated, careful. Harrison Webb. I apologize for calling so late. We need to discuss the property you purchased this morning. I'm listening. I made an error in judgment. Sentimental value clouded my business sense. I'd like to purchase the building back from you. $10,000. Cash. Tomorrow morning. $10,000 for a property he'd sold for $99,000, less than 24 hours ago. Elena felt ice water run down her spine. Not interested, Mr. Webb. A pause, carefully calibrated. $20,000 then. That's extraordinarily generous for a building in that condition. You'd be foolish to refuse. What's in the vault? The silence stretched so long Elena thought he'd hung up. When Webb spoke again, his voice had lost all its smoothness, all its careful control. "You found the basement?" "I did." "Then you understand this is not your concern, Ms. Vasquez. Those documents represent complex business transactions between consenting adults. Ancient history. Nothing that requires your involvement. 6 people died, Mr. Webb. 6 families lost everything. One of them was my family." Another pause, shorter this time. "I see. Then you should understand even more clearly why you need to accept my offer and walk away. Your Aunt Rosa was very unfortunate. It would be tragic if similar misfortune befell her niece. Especially when you have a daughter to think about. Sophia, isn't it? 14 years old. Attends Millbrook Academy." Elena's blood turned to ice. "You're threatening my daughter." "I'm stating facts, Ms. Vasquez. Facts you should consider carefully. Take the money. Forget what you saw. Protect your family." The line went dead. Elena sat in the darkness of her kitchen, staring at the documents scattered before her like pieces of a truth she couldn't unknow. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From rage. From the casual cruelty of a man who thought he could threaten a child to protect his secrets. She thought of Aunt Rosa, of the fire, of 37 families crushed beneath the weight of one family's greed. She thought of the vault, still sealed, still hiding whatever Harrison Webb considered worth threatening a 14-year-old girl over. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number, "Last chance. Be smart." Elena deleted the message. Then she opened her laptop and began searching for the other families named in the documents. If she was going to open that vault, if she was going to expose what the Webb family had done, she couldn't do it alone. Not when they were willing to threaten children. She needed allies. She needed witnesses. She needed people who had been hurt badly enough to risk being hurt again. By dawn, Elena had found 9 families. 9 sets of people still living in Millbrook, still carrying the scars of what the Webb family had done to them. She drafted careful emails through the night, explaining what she discovered in the basement vault, asking if they remembered, asking if they would stand with her. The first response came at 6:47 a.m. "I remember everything. My mother lost her restaurant to Edmund Webb in 1987. She never recovered. I'll help however I can. David Santos." More replies trickled in throughout the morning. Some politely declined, too afraid to revisit old wounds. Others didn't respond at all. But 5 said yes. 5 people who had been waiting decades for someone to finally ask the right questions. Elena also called Patricia Chen, a locksmith who specialized in historical restorations. "That vault you sent me pictures of," Patricia said. "That's military grade from the Cold War era. Whatever's inside, someone wanted it seriously protected. Can you open it?" "Yes, but it'll take specialized equipment and about 6 hours." "And Elena? This feels dangerous. When can you start?" "Tomorrow night. After dark." Elena picked up Sophia from school that afternoon, watching the rearview mirror constantly for the blue SUV. At home, she sat her daughter down at the kitchen table. "Sophia, I need you to stay with your father for a few days." "Mom, no." "What's going on?" "I'm working on something important, and I need to know you're safe." Sophia left that evening, texting complaints the entire drive. Elena watched her go and felt a weight lift. Whatever happened next, her daughter was out of Harrison Webb's reach. The meeting at a coffee shop across town brought together people who looked like strangers but shared the same haunted eyes. David Santos, whose mother's restaurant had burned. Margaret Palmer, whose father died in a construction accident after refusing to sell. James Okoro, whose family lost their home to mysterious foreclosure. Lisa and Robert Chen, whose parents signed over their laundromat for almost nothing after their daughter was hit by a car the driver never found. And Cora Brennan, a thin woman in her 60s with hands that shook. "I'm Thomas Brennan's aunt," she said quietly. "The mayor's aunt. I know what my family did. my father partnered with Edmund Webb for 30 years. I watched it happen. But I kept records. She pulled an envelope from her purse. My father kept journals. Every property acquisition, every payment made, every threat issued. He documented everything because he was paranoid about being betrayed. When he died, I took them. Inside were photocopied pages filled with neat handwriting detailing 40 years of corruption. Names, dates, amounts paid to city inspectors, fire marshals, police officers. The entire framework that had allowed the Webb family to operate with impunity. "This is everything," Elena whispered. "This is a death sentence if the wrong people find out," Cora said. "My nephew Thomas has protected Harrison Webb for years. They own half the city council and most of the police department." "Then we go over their heads," David Santos said. "State Attorney General. FBI. People they don't own." They formed a plan. Patricia would open the vault tomorrow night. Whatever they found would be documented and uploaded to secure cloud storage. Cora would contact a journalist at the state capitol. David had a lawyer friend who specialized in civil rights cases. Elena left after midnight and drove to Crescent Street to check the building before Patricia arrived tomorrow. The street was dark and empty. Luna waited in the truck. Elena approached with her key, but something felt wrong. Luna's hackles rose, a low growl rumbling in her chest. 3 men emerged from the shadows, spreading out to cut off escape routes. Professional, hard-eyed, weapons hidden beneath expensive suits. "Ms. Vasquez," the center man said. "Mr. Webb has been very patient. But patience has limits." Elena's hand went to the taser in her pocket. "Tell Mr. Webb I'm not interested. We're not here to offer money." Luna lunged, snarling. A man kicked the dog hard, sending Luna yelping. Elena pulled the taser but someone knocked it aside. A hand grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. Pain shot through her shoulder. Then headlights flooded the street. A truck screeched to a halt, and David Santos jumped out with a tire iron. Behind him came James Okoro and both Chin siblings, all armed with whatever they'd grabbed. "Let her go," David said quietly. "Now." The men assessed quickly. 4 against 3, with witnesses. The one holding Elena released her with a shove. "You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, people start getting hurt." They disappeared into darkness. Elena ran to Luna, who was limping but alive. David helped her up. "We followed you. Figured you might need backup." "Thank you," Elena managed, shaking. "Which means we're out of time. We open that vault tonight, not tomorrow." Patricia arrived within an hour with equipment. The group descended into the basement together. Patricia set up her tools, connecting sensors and drilling equipment to a laptop running probability algorithms. The work was slow, methodical, accompanied by whining drills and clicking tumblers. 3 hours passed. Then 4. Elena sat with Luna's head in her lap, watching Patricia work. Others took turns keeping watch upstairs. At 4:17 a.m., something clicked. Patricia's laptop flashed green. The vault's lock turned smoothly. "We're in," Patricia whispered. The door swung open, releasing decades of sealed air. Inside, metal shelves lined the walls, covered with boxes. Financial records. Bank statements from the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Luxembourg. Decades of money laundering, tax evasion, illegal payments. Edmund Webb and Richard Brennan had built an entire criminal enterprise using Millbrook's urban renewal as cover. But on the bottom shelf sat videotapes, each labeled with dates and locations. Elena pulled one randomly, Palmer Hardware, March 15, 1989. "That's the day my father died," Margaret Palmer whispered. Elena found a television and VCR in the vault corner. Her hands shook as she inserted the tape. Grainy footage showed a construction site. The camera zoomed on a crane, on someone tampering with safety mechanisms. 2 hours before the accident that killed Margaret's father. The person sabotaging equipment turned toward the camera, face clearly visible. Edmund Webb. He filmed himself, David said in disbelief. Insurance, Cora explained. Against my father. If Richard ever turned on him, Edmund could prove they were both guilty. More tape showed the warehouse fire, carbon monoxide leak, the hit and run. All documented. All showing Edmund Webb or hired associates deliberately causing the accidents that terrorized families into selling. This is evidence of multiple murders, Elena said. They spent 2 hours documenting everything. Photographs of every document, every tape, every bank statement. They uploaded files to 3 cloud services, emailed copies to journalists and lawyers, made physical backups. By sunrise, the evidence was scattered across dozens of locations, impossible to suppress. Elena called the FBI field office in the state capital. The next 72 hours passed in a blur. Federal agents descended on Millbrook with warrants. Harrison Webb was arrested, along with 6 city officials including Mayor Thomas Brennan. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The story exploded across state and national news. Elena watched from her apartment, Luna beside her, Sophia home and asking questions. David called to say prosecutors were filing charges. Margaret sent flowers. Cora visited, looking lighter somehow. My father's crimes don't define me anymore, Cora said. Because of you, the truth is finally out. 3 weeks later, the state attorney general's office established a victims' compensation fund using seized Webb family assets. 37 families would receive restitution. Properties would be returned where possible. Stolen wealth would go back to the people it was taken from. Elena stood in front of the empty storefront on Crescent Street. The city offered to buy it for fair market value, money she desperately needed. But she had other plans. She was going to restore it. Turn it into a community center for the families who'd lost so much. A memorial to Aunt Rosa and everyone crushed by powerful men who thought they were untouchable. The vault door still stood open in the basement, empty now except for echoes. Elena decided to leave it open. A reminder that secrets, no matter how carefully locked away, eventually came to light. Luna barked at something in the street. Sophia was arriving with lunch. Elena smiled and locked the door, the key solid in her hand. She had bought this building for $99. It had cost her sleep, safety, and peace of mind. It had nearly cost her everything. But it had given her something more valuable, the knowledge that one person, armed with truth and courage, could face down corruption that lasted generations. The vault had held secrets. Elena had set them free. And in doing so, she had freed an entire community from 40 years of fear.